I'm Jeff Kavanaugh, head of the Infosys Knowledge Institute, the thought leadership and research arm of Infosys. Today, we're talking about bias in artificial intelligence with Sudhanshu Hate, a senior principal architect at Infosys. He's also the inventor and platform head of IECP, which is the Infosys Enterprise Cognitive Platform. Welcome, Sudhanshu.
Thanks, Jeff. Thanks for having me. It's nice to be here.
Sudhanshu, you spent the last 6+ years focusing on solving multiple AI problems in computer vision, speech, documents, unstructured text, and more. What does responsible and ethical AI mean to you? And also, why do you think so much importance is being placed on responsible AI today?
Responsible AI is becoming important because there is a lot of brand value and social value associated with it. There are certain things that have gone wrong with AI implementations in certain cases, and that has created a lot of negative press. And that is kind of bringing everybody's attention to do AI in a right way. And that's where responsible AI is becoming important. So responsible AI is a very broad subject, but to keep it very simple, responsible AI means being fair, being responsible, building systems that are explainable, interpretable, and systems that can produce results in a repeatable, consistent manner.
What exactly would you say is bias in AI, and how do they get introduced into an AI system?
So bias is primarily it's about generating results in a particular favor. It could be in favor of certain personalities. It could be in favor of certain gender, or it could be in favor of certain region. Primarily, the bias gets introduced when you are training the AI system and when you are putting the data while training the AI system, because the data itself may be biased towards a particular class, and that can introduce the bias in the system.
All right, that's a good textbook definition. Now let's get practical. Can you share a couple of examples with us, maybe in different sectors?
If you are building an AI-based recruitment system and it has a significant amount of data that is loaded towards a particular gender, or individuals who are coming from specific city, that is the data used for training the AI system, then the system would be more biased towards profile of the individual. There are more examples in mortgage industry as well, where denial of loan can happen based on where that person is coming from. For example, if that person is situated in a particular location, be it its PIN code or address, that can also introduce the bias in terms of giving mortgages or sanctioning loans and stuff like that.
Well, you gave us examples of what to avoid. What techniques are currently in place to ensure that bias does not creep in the decision-making processes in these areas?
It starts right at upfront with the problem selection. The problem that we select should be bias free. And then when you get into dataset creation for training your artificial intelligence system, the classes of the data for the different classes should be well balanced. It should not be primarily in favor of one class. And the third is selection of the right algorithm. And then obviously it has to be monitored over a period of time through manual things.
Much of the thinking and what we all hear about bias in AI is at the algorithm level. And you mentioned a couple other areas. How can technology play a role to remove bias from every stage in AI in the life cycle?
Technology plays an important role because when you are creating data, you have to ensure the data that you are going to use to train your model is well represented. So there are techniques to look at the representation of data in a data set. Second is the data quality obviously is important in terms of whether they are null values and whether all classes are represented and stuff like that. Third is looking at the explainability of the model. So there are frameworks that help you explain the outputs of a model, and that is very, very useful in justifying the results that are produced by AI system.
Bias detection is an area, but just one area to make sure that AI is robust and accurate. Are there any ways, especially simpler ways, to ensure that human involvement and reproducibility, in other words, they're consistent when you scale algorithms?
So human involvement is very important because what can happen is the bias can get introduced at any stage. So it's very important that there is a very strong human involvement right at the selection of a problem, creation of data set, while creating the data set, collection of the data, uh, audit of that data, whatever data has been collected, what are the sources of that data. Then once the data is collected, the classes are properly represented, in what condition that data will be used to create a model, what are the algorithms that you would use to train your model, and then in what condition the current system will not work uh, is also very important. Once you have trained model and put it into production, the results that are generated by the AI system are verified by humans so that the system is behaving as per the design principles that have been laid out, and then the learnings from the actual usage of the system must be fed back to correct if there are any deviations from what is required or what is being presented.
I think that feedback loop is so important
Yeah.
because that human AI partnering, it's almost like it's human augmented intelligence. AI is a different connotation. Besides that, what other developments help businesses tackle the ethical and conscientious development, things like regulatory or government involvement? What can be done?
Because this is very evolving field, so it's very important that businesses have a very good perspective of what is happening in the regulatory world, what are various regulation in their industry, be it healthcare or insurance or finance, and what are the things that they should be avoiding so that they don't get onto the wrong side of the regulations. So awareness of that regulation, having those regulations clearly documented and published is very important from industry perspective.
You lay out a very strong case for doing this. And so let's say an organization is ready to jump in. What kind of challenges do you see when a company tries to implement ethical and responsible AI?
First and foremost, when companies are trying to implement ethical AI, they have to understand the landscape and the complexity of it. So the awareness of ethical AI should be there with all stakeholders. What are the nuances if responsible AI is not implemented in a correct way? So that is on the education or awareness perspective. There should be consistent, coherent principles that everybody should be able to abide by and everybody should be able to aware of, so that the system that is built is falls within that scope of principles and it adheres to that. And then there are other things like usage of right technology, usage of right frameworks, usage of right processes such as having standard checklists, governance mechanisms, so that there is no scope of bias creeping in at any stage of the AI life cycle. And if at all it creeps in, it gets caught and eliminated from the complete thing.
Let's say there's some early adopters, people who are already down the path a bit, they're fairly mature in using AI, at least what's out there. What is that next level of challenge companies are going to face as they get deeper into their journey and they try to have a really robust AI roadmap for the future?
So the challenges that most of the companies are facing is how do they keep pace with the complex architectures, complex algorithms that are coming in, the data that is coming into the system, because the amount of data, the sources of data, that is continuously changing, that is continuously varying, and the volume is coming at a very high speed. So how do you ensure the data sets that you use, you maintain, curate, and maintain the sanity of it, and then deploy it and continuously ensure the systems are being monitored uh, and they are behaving in a right way, so that they are not creating any issues knowingly or unknowingly for the end users.
A lot of folks say, you know what can I do right now? So if you had just to narrow it down or isolate three things that an executive or leader could do to take these ideas forward, what would you tell them?
So first and foremost, one must have clear set of principles that enterprise can adhere to. The second thing is have right set of technology frameworks, tools that will help you manage this, implement this. And third is have right set of processes and governance mechanism which will oversee and keep this straight throughout the journey.
Sudhanshu, thank you so much for your time in a very interesting discussion. Hopefully, we weren't too biased about responsible AI. It's my pleasure to have this discussion and very interesting dialogue. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jeff. It's been my privilege, and it's been great working with you and your team at Infosys Knowledge Institute. We have created a lot of interesting artifacts, be it around Tech Compass or other things. It's been really great journey so far.